Hello everyone, welcome to Visual Application Programming Lecture Series, Lecture 3, C# Selection Statements. In this lecture, we will be discussing about how to use selection statements to branch the execution of a program. Taking decisions based on one or more conditions is something we practice in our day-to-day life. As an example, if the sky is cloudy, you bring an umbrella with you, or if the road is clear, then only you cross the road. Similarly, in the programming domain, you may have to take decisions, run a specific set of instructions, or branch the code under different inputs or conditions. Conditions can be given as a user input, or some state of the system, or evaluation of data that we have, and code will be branched based on the evaluation of these conditions. C# provides few ways to branch the code based on conditions such as conditional operator, if-else statements, and switch statements. We will study if-else statements first and discuss other methods in later part of the video. If statement is one of the basic selection statements. We can use if statement to evaluate a Boolean expression and execute block of statements based on the result of the Boolean expression. If statement can be extended with optional else construct. Here we see an example of if statement. A plus b is greater than to 10 is the Boolean expression. Execution of the next statement will be based on the result of this expression. Since a plus b is greater than to 10 in this example, the answer is greater than 10 will be printed on the screen. If the total of a plus b is not greater than to 10, then the print statement will not be executed. Next, we have an example of if-else statement. In the first example, we had only if clause and we did not define what happens if the condition is not true. But if you want something else to be executed when the if condition is not true, then you can use the else clause. Here you print pass on the screen if the score is greater than or equals to 50. If not, you print fail on the screen. Syntax of the if statement is shown here. Condition, which is the Boolean expression, should be given in the parentheses followed by the if keyword. Then one or more statements can be given in the block denoted by the curly brackets. You can omit the curly brackets if you need to execute only one statement. The statement just after the if statement will be considered in that case under if clause. Flow diagram of the if statement is shown here. As you can see, condition expression will be evaluated first. If the condition is true, then conditional code will be executed. And if the condition is false, then conditional code will be skipped. Here we have another example for if statement. Value of the variable name will be evaluated as the condition, and since it is equivalent to string C#, Boolean expression will be evaluated to true. So the welcome message will be displayed. Most of the time, we need to define what happens if the condition is not true. C# provides if-else statement for this purpose. We can code what to do when the if condition fails using if-else statement. Syntax of the if-else is shown here. You need to write the if clause as in previous example, and after the curly brackets for if clause is closed, you can put the code block for the else clause enclosed with curly brackets followed by the else keyword as shown here. Similar to if clause, if you don't use curly brackets, only the immediate statement after else keyword will be considered as the statement belongs to the else clause. Flow diagram of an if-else statement is given in this slide. Condition will be evaluated first, and if the value is evaluated to true, if block will be executed. If the condition is evaluated to false, then else block will be executed. Example for the if-else statement is given here. Code block for if clause or else clause will be executed depend on the result of the condition expression. In this case, welcome to Visual Application Programming will be printed as the name variable is equals to the string C#. If we change the variable name to a different string, then welcome to ICT application, which is the statement in the else clause, will be printed on the screen. If-else structure can be further augmented to include more than one statement. If-else if ladder statement can be used to execute one block of statements from multiple blocks of statements using condition expressions. Execution of the if-else if ladder will be started with the first if condition, and expression of the first if will be evaluated to check the value. If the value is true, then the code block belongs to first if clause will be evaluated, and the execution of whole if-else if ladder will be completed without further checking remaining conditions. If the expression is evaluated to the value false, then the next else if condition will be evaluated. This process will continue until the execution finds the first condition, which evaluates to true. If none of the if conditions evaluates to be true, then the code block of the last else clause will be executed. The flow diagram of the if-else if ladder is shown in this slide. As I mentioned in the previous slide, condition of the first if clause will be evaluated first, and if it is true, then block of statements for the first if clause will be executed, and execution of the if-else if ladder will end. If not, then the second if condition will be evaluated, and if it is true, then block of statements for the second if clause will be evaluated. This process will continue, and if none of the conditions evaluates to true, then last clause will be executed. You can see an example of if-else if ladder in this slide. One thing to notice here is that we have only single statement for each of the if clauses. So we can omit the curly brackets, as immediate statement followed by the if clause will be executed. If the condition of that if clause is true, and that will be enough in this case. Based on the value of I, one statement will be executed in this if-else if ladder. As the value of I is 5 in this example, I is 5 will be printed. If I is not any of 1, 3 or 5, then the statement in the else clause will be executed. Sometimes we need to select a decision based on multiple if conditions that can happen one after another. To understand this clearly, let's take a real life example. Assume there is a student just finished the O-level exams and planning his future career. There are multiple options available, such as do the A-levels in maths stream, bioscience stream, commerce stream, arts stream, etc. So the student should think what happens if he selects the maths stream. Then there are another set of options based on which university and faculty he can go to. If he gets selected to engineering faculty, then one set of options. If he gets selected to science faculty, then another set of options. Likewise, there are many options available based on every stream in A-levels. So this can be further extended to another set of if conditions. If we take the condition where he is in the engineering faculty, then there can be another set of options based on the department he is selected to. If it is computer science and engineering, then he can become a computer engineer. If it is the civil engineering, he can become a civil engineer. In this example, we have a set of if-else statements inside another set of if-else statements. We call this as nested if-else statement. Similarly, we need the same concept when we write programs as well. So, C# provides the ability of having nested if-else statements in our programs. Syntax of a nested if-else is shown here. Inside the code block of the outer if clause, we can include another set of if-else statements. We can extend this further by including another nested if-else inside already existing nested if-else as well. Also, we can include nested if-else in the else clause as shown here. Generally, we use nested if-else statements when we have to test one condition followed by another. In a nested if-else statement, if the outer if statement returns true, it enters the body of the if clause to check the inner if statement in the if clause. If the outer if statement returns false, it enters the body of the else clause to check the inner if statement in the else clause. You can see the flow diagram of a nested if-else statement in this slide. Condition in the first if clause will be executed first, and then if that is true, execution will be directed to the if clause inside the first if clause. Then statement 1 or statement 2 will be executed depending on the Boolean value of the nested if condition. If the first if clause is evaluated to be false, then execution will move to the nested if else in the else clause. Based on the condition value there, statement 3 or statement 4 will be executed, and this process will continue for every nested if else clause. Let's discuss an example of nested if statement. Here I have a program that computes the largest number among three numbers using nested if else statements. We have three variables declared and initialized, namely A, B and C. Our logic is to compare variables A and B first, and then take the larger one between A and B, and then compare that with the variable C. In this slide, we have the code block when A is greater than B. Then we'll check whether A is also greater than C. If so, we can print A is the largest. If C is greater than A, then we know that C is also greater than B, as we have already concluded that A is greater than B in the outer if clause. So we can print C is the largest. Program execution will fall to else clause of the outer if clause if A is less than to B. Then we check whether B is greater than C, and if yes, we can print B is the largest. If not, that means C is the largest among all three. According to this example, we have already initialized the variables. A is 7, B is minus 23, and C is 13 in this case. So when we execute the program, first if clause will be evaluated to true as 7 is greater than to minus 23. But the inner clause will be false as 7 is not greater than to 13. So else clause will be executed and 13 is the largest will be printed. Switch is another construct provided by C# to select code blocks to be executed based on conditions. You can use switch to compare an expression with a constant value. Switch statement can operate on booleans, integer types, and strings. Also, every statement sequence in a case block must be end with the break keyword. You can have optional default case, and the statements in the default case block will be executed if none of the cases match the expression. Syntax of the switch construct is shown in this slide. You need to include the expression in the parentheses followed by the switch keyword. Then in the brackets you can put the constant values that need to be checked against the expression as different cases. In each case you can have set of statements to be executed if that case matches with the expression. Important thing to remember is that you need to end each case with break keyword. Also, a default case can be included. You can use this default clause to execute a set of instructions when none of the other choices match with the expression. Sometimes default clause helps to catch any unforeseen circumstances and make your programs more reliable. Flowchart diagram of a switch statement is shown here. First, the expression in the switch will be evaluated and the evaluated value will be compared against constants in the cases. If there is a match, then the statements in that case will be executed, and with the break keyword, execution will fall off from the switch construct. Example of a switch construct is shown here. Here, variable x is given as the expression in the switch. Depending on the value of the variable x, one of the cases will be executed. If the value of x is string red, then first case will be executed. If the value of x is string green, then second case will be executed. Similarly, third case will be executed if the value of x is blue. If the value of x is not any of red, green or blue, then the default case will be executed. As I mentioned earlier, break keyword must be used after every statement sequence. Similar to nested if-else statements, we can have nested switch cases in C#. Syntax of the nested switch statement is shown here. Inner switches can be included in one or more of the cases in parent switch. As you can see here, outer switch evaluates ch1, and inside the case of A, we have an inner switch case to evaluate ch2. Conditional operator is another construct which is provided by C# for selections. Conditional operator evaluates a Boolean expression and returns the result of one of the two expressions depending on whether the Boolean expression evaluates to true or false. The condition expression must evaluate to true or false. If condition evaluates to true, the consequent expression is evaluated and its result becomes the result of the operation. If condition evaluates to false, the alternative expression is evaluated and its result becomes the result of the operation. Syntax of the conditional operator is shown here. Condition expression should be given at the beginning and then consequent expression should be mentioned. After the column symbol, you can give the alternative expression. Example of a conditional operator is given here. X is greater than to y is the condition expression here. Then the consequent expression is x is greater than y and alternative expression is x is less than y. Depending on the Boolean output of the condition expression, one of these two strings will be assigned to variable result and that will be printed using the last statement. In this video, we discussed about the selection constructs available in C# language, namely if statement, if-else statement, nested if statement, switch statement, nested switch statement, and conditional operator. A summary of each of these constructs is given in this slide.